the newborn infant. Go back to the newborn infant. The newborn infant is present, it is aware, and it is at peace. We describe them as three separate words, but that experience is one experience. But if you were to ask what is the nature of the newborn infant's experience before thoughts, feelings, sensations, and perceptions have arisen, there is presence, there is awareness, and there is peace. So there are just three different ways of trying to describe what is one experience. The newborn infant is not having three separate experiences. It's just one unitary experience, which could be described as being, it could be described as awareness, it could be described as peace. Nirvana is the screen before the movie has begun. Samsara is the movie, and the screen and the movie are one. Being, or consciousness, is the screen. Experience, in my language, is the movie, thoughts, feelings, sensations, and perceptions. And consciousness and experience are one. It's exactly the same understanding. I just use the words awareness for the screen, just the awareness of being prior to the arising of experience. And then there's experience, thoughts, feelings, sensations, and perceptions. But they're not two things, although sometimes we may separate them out. If you're lost in the movie, it's legitimate to begin with to draw attention to the screen behind the movie. So we make a distinction between the movie and the screen, just for pedagogical purposes, just to draw attention to the screen. Well, once we've recognized the screen, we then dispense with that teaching and say, no, really, it's not the screen and the movie. It's the screen as the movie. So we talk about awareness and experience. I am aware of my thoughts, but I am not my thoughts. I am aware of my feelings, but I am not my feelings. I am aware of my perceptions, but I am not my perceptions. We separate out awareness from experience. Why? Because most people are just lost in experience. They've overlooked awareness. So to draw attention to awareness, we first discriminate between the two. Experience, that's what I'm aware of. But awareness is what I essentially am. We make a distinction between the two. But then we have to, at some stage, once this distinction has successfully drawn attention to the presence of awareness in ourself or as ourself, we then dispense with that teaching. It's done its job. We then have to bring the two back together again, because there's no distinction between experience and awareness. Experience is a colouring of awareness, just as the movie is a colouring of the screen. The screen is empty, the movie is full of form, but they are one and the same thing. It's the empty screen appears as the movie full of forms. But the movie full of forms and shapes and colours is only an appearance of the empty screen. The screen is inherently empty, but it takes the form of the movie. So awareness, or our being, as we discovered experientially this morning, I hope, our being, prior to the arising of experience, is empty of experience, full of itself, but empty of experience. And yet it is this aware being that assumes the form of experience, that puts on the goggles of thinking and perceiving, that assumes the form of thinking and perceiving, and appears to itself as the universe. But thinking and perceiving are not, they're not put on from the outside. It is awareness itself that assumes the form of thinking and perceiving, like the empty screen assumes the form of the fullness of the movie. The emptiness of the screen appears as the fullness of the movie. The emptiness of awareness appears as the fullness of experience. But they are one and the same thing, both empty and full. Is sometimes thought of as an extraordinary experience that you might have, just as in the Vedantic tradition, enlightenment, the recognition of the nature of our being, is sometimes considered to be an extraordinary experience that we might have in 30 years' time, Whereas what is really being pointed to is just the nature of our being that lies prior to experience, that we essentially are, and that we are now, but that is mostly veiled by thoughts and perceptions. Obvious, but sometimes veiled, the most familiar non-experience that there is. But if our being has been veiled, if we've lost touch with our being, and all we know is experience, all we know are thoughts, feelings, sensations, and perceptions, then the idea of infinite being, that sounds extraordinary. Maybe in 30 years' time, if I meditate for long enough and I work hard enough and I give up all the enjoyable things in life, then I might have this extraordinary experience that only 1 in a million enlightened sages have. So we project our being at an infinite distance. In the Christian tradition, it's called God. We project God at an infinite distance from ourselves, beyond the universe, beyond. And God is not beyond the universe, it's prior to the universe. God is not beyond experience, it's prior to experience, closer, not further away, but closer than experience. But if we've lost touch with our being, we think, we imagine that the mind, the object-knowing mind, only knows experience, thoughts, feelings, sensations, perceptions, and therefore it conceives nirvana or enlightenment as an think of the best experience you can have, and then multiply it by 100. That must be enlightenment. Or it's a complete misunderstanding. But that's all the mind can do. All the mind can do is imagine the best object that it knows. I don't have to describe that. We can all imagine the best experience you can have in life, and then you just times that by 100. That's the best the mind can do if the mind tries to conceive, because all the mind can know are objects. So that's the best the mind can do. It's a childish representation of enlightenment or nirvana. Really, it's just the nature of being. Just the nature of your being that you are now, prior to experience.
I just want to share a brief a part of my meditation from today morning, and I want to see if you confirm where I arrived. But I felt this sudden shift of huge expansion, and later after the meditation I asked myself, okay, but what is the difference between having this expansion experience on one hand side, and the other that I am that, which sounds different, like I'm experiencing this infinite or I'm the infinite. And what I realize is that it's not that I am the expansion, I am who is experienced, because it needs a larger container to experience an expansion.
You cannot experience the infinite. You can only be that knowingly. Anything you experience, in order to experience something, you have to stand apart from that thing. Yes? In order to see me, you must stand apart from me. Yes? In order to perceive anything, a tree, a mountain, a house, we have to stand at a distance from that thing. We have to stand in subject-object relationship. And that goes for knowledge as well as experience. Anything we know it from a distance. I know my thoughts. I see the tree. All knowledge and experience takes place in subject-object relationship. All knowledge and experience. So in order to know or experience anything, we must stand apart from it as a separate subject and perceive it or hear it or feel it or taste it or know it. However, there's an inherent limitation in this subject-object mechanism, namely that the subject that knows or experiences must be limited. So everything that the separate subject of experience knows is filtered through its limited perceiving or knowing faculties. Therefore, whatever the separate subject of experience knows, that is each of us, whatever we know appears, we know through our limited perceiving faculties, and whatever we know appears in accordance with the limitations of the subject that knows it. So the separate subject of experience can only know something that is limited. It's not possible for the finite to know the infinite. You can't see white snow through orange-tinted glasses. So it's not possible to know the infinite. If you think you know the infinite, you've represented the infinite in your mind, and you're just knowing an image of it. So the only way to, quote, know the infinite is to be that knowingly.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say, but the infinite can know the finite?
No.
No?
The infinite can't know the finite, or at least the infinite can only know the
through a witness.
The infinite can only know the finite through the perceiving faculties of a finite mind. Why can't the infinite know the finite? Imagine infinite. You now, when you look at me, you see one object. Yes? Why? Because you see it from one point of view. Yeah? Now, there are 100 people sitting in this room, and everyone sees my body from a slightly different point of view. So you're all seeing my body from 100 different points of view. Now, imagine if you were each to take a snapshot of my body and were to superimpose, and we superimposed all those images one on top of the other. So you have 100 images of my body all superimposed on top of it. What would my body look like? It would be a blur. It wouldn't look like one clear body, but it would be a blur. Yeah. Now, imagine the infinite trying to see my body, not from 100 points of view, but from every possible point of view in space, including all the points of view within my body, because if it's infinite, it must be everywhere. So imagine taking an image of my body from every point in space, and then superimposing those images on top of one another and looking at it. What would you see? Black. The densest black. There would be no object there. The infinite cannot know or perceive the finite. That's why infinite consciousness's experience of itself is just I am. And that experience doesn't take place in subject-object experience. And the only experience that we have that doesn't take place in subject-object experience is the experience I am. The experience I am in each of us is the infinite's knowledge of itself. So the infinite is a realm of potential, where all things possible are contained in potential, but they cannot be realized. They cannot be manifest except from the point of view of a finite mind. So if the infinite wants to know something other than itself, other than its own formless infinite being, it must contract. It must localize itself. It must forget itself. It must squeeze itself into the frame of a finite mind. That's each of us. Then, through our limited perceiving faculties, it can look out at the rest of itself, the uncontracted part of itself, and see itself as the universe. But it doesn't see itself as it really is. Why? Because it is looking at itself through the narrow lens of our perceiving faculties, and our perceiving faculties impose their limitations on the infinite's view of itself. And that's why it's not possible to know reality by observing the world. The only way to know reality is to go to that single experience that is available to us, that is not mediated through thought and perception. That is the knowledge I am. And that is why it is said that the knowledge I am is, that I am is God's name. It is absolute knowledge. It's the knowledge I am, the knowing of being, the awareness of being is the only experience there is that is not subject to the limitations of a finite mind. So if you want to know the nature of reality, you have, sooner or later, you have to go to your own being. That's why sooner or later, a scientist who's exploring reality, going into the world, looking, trying to find out what the world, what reality, what the universe truly is, sooner or later, they have to become a mystic. They have to investigate. That's the only way it's possible. That's where a scientist becomes a mystic. When they recognize that to know the nature of reality, they have to go to their own being. Einstein understood that.
You know thoughts and sense perceptions. That's all you know objectively. Just check that that's true. Just range over your experience. Do you ever come across anything that is not either a thought or an image, and a sense perception? So those are the only two forms of objective experience that we have. Through thought, we know something called mind, and through sense perception, we know something called matter. Conception and perception. So consciousness rises in the form of thought and perception in order to know an object. Just think of it. Try to know something objective that you don't know either through conception or perception.
I'm getting stuck on.
What evidence is there of a world outside perception? Yeah. Let's say there are 7 billion people. Let's imagine they're all awake now. So let's imagine there are 7 billion perceptions taking place. Now, the conventional view is that inside each of those people there is a little parcel of consciousness. And that consciousness is looking out through the eyes in the form of perception and seeing the same world. So the conventional view is that there is 7 billion consciousnesses, all taking the shape of perception and seeing one world. But strangely, nobody's ever found that one world. Because all each of the 7 billion of us knows is our own perception. Now, my perception is different from yours. Yet, can two perceptions meet? Have you ever seen two perceptions meeting or touching each other? What sort of an experience would that be, two perceptions? Try to make your perception now and my perception touch each other. Can you do that? Can two thoughts meet? Try now. You think of something and I'll think of something. Do thoughts ever meet each other? Do they ever touch each other? Let's go back to 7 billion people, each with their own parcel of consciousness inside their heads, looking out in the form of perception through their eyes and seeing the shared world. 7 billion consciousnesses viewing one world. Founding principle of our culture. So, what is your experience of that shared world? Have you ever found the world that is independent of your perception? Has anybody ever found it? Could anybody ever find it? In what form would you find the world outside your perception of it? How would it appear to you? No. Nobody has ever or could ever find this world outside perception, and yet we presume that it is there. So we presume that there are 7 billion consciousnesses, and each consciousness we think is limited to the body, and each of those consciousnesses looking at the same world. Now our experience is the opposite of that. Nobody has ever experienced a limited consciousness. So the fact that there are 7 billion consciousnesses is a presumption. In order for there to be 7 billion consciousnesses, or let's just say 2 consciousnesses, yours and mine, we would both have to be able to see the end of our consciousness. My consciousness ends there, and yours begins just outside mine. Have you ever found an edge to your consciousness? Has anybody ever found a limit to their consciousness? No, so the idea of 7 billion consciousnesses is an idea that is not validated by experience. Likewise, the idea of one world is an idea that is not validated by experience. Could it not be that instead of 7 billion consciousnesses and one world, could it not be that there is one consciousness and 7 billion worlds? Could it not be that the world that each of us is seeing now, or let's say the room that each of us is seeing, conventional thought says there are 75 consciousnesses seeing one room. Could it not be that one consciousness is seeing 75 rooms? That 75 rooms are arising out of the same consciousness. Why is there a consistency between the 75 rooms? Because they all come from the same consciousness. It is the consistency of consciousness that gives the world, the 75 worlds, their apparent consistency. What we share is not the world, it is consciousness. Your world is private. Your perceptions are private. Your sensations are private. Your thoughts are private. Nobody can experience the sensation you're having. No one can experience the perception you're having. No one can experience the thought that you are having. But the you that are having it, how do we know that that isn't shared? We don't. It's just a presumption. It's a religion of materialism to which our culture subscribes. A religion that consciousness is a byproduct of and limited by the body. There is not one shred of evidence for it.
Are there 75 Ruperts that we're all perceiving?
Yes. You think that I, Rupert, this body, has existence. Objects don't have existence. That's what our culture believes. Our culture believes that every object has its own existence. Objects don't have existence. Existence is not a byproduct or a quality of the object. Existence has objects. Objects don't have existence.